There was a moment when I realized my name only came up when they needed something. It wasn't about who I was anymore. It was about what I could still do for them. And the strangest thing was, nobody seemed to notice that this had changed. I didn't say anything, I just started observing. And when you really pay attention without reacting, things become very clear. Clearer than any conversation ever could. My name is Robert. I'm 67 years old. I spent the last 42 years working at the same financial consulting firm, building something solid. My wife, Margaret, died 7 years ago. Cancer. It was too soon. It left me and 3 adult children, 2 married, 1 divorced, 4 grandchildren. After Margaret passed away, I became the family's mainstay. Not because anyone asked me to, it just happened. My oldest son, David, was having marital problems. I helped with the down payment on their new house. My middle daughter, Rachel, wanted to open a veterinary clinic. I lent her the initial capital. My youngest son, Thomas, went through an expensive divorce. I paid for the lawyers. I didn't care. They were my family. It was what a father did. Margaret would have done the same. But in the last 2 years, something changed. It didn't happen overnight. It was like when you realize winter has arrived, but you can't pinpoint the exact day autumn ended. The calls started to follow a pattern. It was never, "How are you, Dad?" It was, "Dad, do you have a minute?" And that minute always ended with a request. Sometimes it was for money. Sometimes it was for me to pick up the grandchildren from school because they had an appointment. Sometimes it was for me to solve some problem they had with their tax return, because after all, I knew about these things. I helped. I always helped. But I started to notice that nobody asked about me anymore. Nobody wanted to know if I was okay, if I was tired, if I needed anything. Last Thanksgiving, we gathered at David's house. I arrived early, as always, bringing the wine Margaret used to choose. I helped set the table. I chatted with the grandchildren. But during dinner, when Rachel started talking about the clinic renovation, she turned to me and said almost jokingly, "Dad, do you remember when you helped me open the clinic? It seems like an eternity, doesn't it? Luckily, I don't need that kind of help anymore." Everyone laughed. Even I smiled. But something felt wrong to me. It wasn't about the money. It was about the tone, as if that support was something distant, old, irrelevant. It was as if I were a tool they had used and was now stored away in the garage. I didn't say anything. I just watched. And it was at that moment that I started paying real attention. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If you're listening to this now and somehow it makes sense to you, leave a comment telling me where you're hearing this story from. It doesn't have to be long. Just tell me where you're from. This creates a connection. It helps me know I'm not talking alone. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Because I'm going to keep sharing stories like this. Stories that you might recognize. Maybe you've already lived them. Or maybe you're living them now. After that Thanksgiving, I started noticing little things. Things I used to let slide. David called me 3 weeks later. He needed me to babysit my grandchildren for the weekend because he and his wife were going on a couple's retreat. I said yes. I always said yes. But when I hung up the phone, I realized something. He didn't ask if I had plans. He just assumed I'd be available. And I always was. But not because I didn't have a life of my own. It was because I had built my life around them. Rachel texted me a few days later. It was a picture of a new car, an imported SUV, beautiful, expensive. The message said, "Look what I got, Dad. The clinic is doing so well that I could finally treat myself." To this gift, I replied with a heart emoji, but I stared at that message for a while. The clinic I helped open. The money I lent that was never returned, because after all it was family money. Now she was buying luxury cars, and I didn't feel anger. It wasn't that. It was just emptiness. I realized it early on. I realized that for them, my support had become history. A thing of the past, something that no longer mattered. But the expectation that I would continue helping, that was still very much alive. Thomas called me the following week. He was having problems in his apartment. The heater had broken and the repair was going to cost $1,500. He didn't have the money. He asked if I could advance it for him. I transferred the money that same afternoon. But this time I kept thinking, moving forward, as if he were going to pay me back. I knew he wasn't going to. He knew he wasn't going to. But we pretended we were. I started noticing how they spoke to me. It wasn't outright disrespect. It was something more subtle, a kind of polite distraction, as if I were an available resource, but not a person with needs of my own. I stopped calling so often, not out of anger, just to see what would happen. 2 weeks passed. No one called. No one texted to ask if I was okay. But on the 16th day, David called me. He needed help with his tax return. He had forgotten to include some investments and was lost. I helped, as always. But when I hung up, I felt something different, a cold clarity. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking for me because they needed something. I stopped trying to explain myself. It was pointless, because to them I hadn't changed. I was still the same father, the same Robert, always available, always solving problems. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I didn't realize. But I understood everything. On Margaret's birthday, I always visited her grave. It was a ritual of mine. This year I decided to do something different. I invited the 3 of them to go with me. I sent a message in the family group chat. David replied first. "Dad, I'd love to, but the boys have soccer practice. You know how it is." Rachel then replied, "Oh, Dad, I have appointments all day, but I think about her all the time. You know that." Thomas didn't even answer. I went alone, as always. I brought flowers. I cleaned the gravestone. I sat there for an hour, just talking to her in my head. I told her about the children, about how well they were doing, about how much I missed her, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not because she had died. I had already made peace with that. I cried because I realized that without her, I had become invisible. I was useful, but I wasn't seen. When I got home, I opened my finance notebook. I've always been organized. I've always kept everything recorded. I added up everything I'd given my children since Margaret died. Down payment, business, capital, lawyers, repairs, emergencies, small advances that turned into gifts, $230,000. It wasn't about the money, it never was. But it was about recognition, about them understanding that it wasn't obvious. It wasn't automatic, it was a choice. It was sacrifice, it was love, and they had treated it as if it were nothing. I closed the notebook, and I decided something. I wasn't going to offer anymore. If they needed me, they would have to ask, and ask for real. Not like someone asking a favor of an employee, but like someone asking something important of someone who matters. I didn't know if they would notice, but I was going to find out. The following weeks were quiet. I continued my routine. Gym 3 times a week, reading at night, lunches with 2 old friends. I've always had my life. It's just that I'd put it on the back burner for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it was like to live for myself. David called me on a Thursday. He was excited. He'd gotten a promotion at work. He was going to earn 20% more. He told me everything. I congratulated him. I was happy for him. But as he was about to hang up, I waited. I waited to see if he would ask how I was, if he would show any interest in my life. He didn't ask. He said, "I love you, Dad," and hung up. I held the phone for a few seconds after the call dropped. I thought to myself, he loves me. I know he does. But he doesn't see me. Not really. Rachel posted a photo on Instagram. She was at a resort in the Caribbean, vacationing with her husband. The caption said something about well-deserved rest after so much work. I liked it, but I didn't comment. I remembered when she opened the clinic. I remembered how nervous she was, how I sat with her, reviewed the business plan, helped organize everything. I remembered how she called me every week during the first year, asking for advice. Now she was posting photos of resorts, and I just liked them. Thomas showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday morning. He had a toolbox. He said he was going to fix my backyard fence, which was a bit crooked. I hadn't even asked. I was surprised, even grateful. We worked together for about 2 hours. It was good. He seemed more relaxed. We talked about trivial things, sports, the weather. Nothing deep. When we finished, he put away his tools. I offered him lunch. He said he couldn't. He had to go. And then, almost as he was leaving, he turned. Anne said, "Dad, I'm a bit strapped for cash this month. Do you think you could lend me about $700? Just until the 15th. I looked at him, and for the first time I felt something different. Not anger, not disappointment, just tiredness. He hadn't come to fix my fence out of kindness. He'd come because he wanted to ask for money and thought that would soften the blow. I gave him the money. But after he left, I sat on the porch, and I understood. I had become a resource, not a father. A resource. Resources don't have feelings. Resources just need to be available. I had a friend, Richard, whom I'd known since college. We used to have lunch together every Tuesday at a small Italian restaurant near downtown. Richard was always straightforward, no beating around the bush. That Tuesday he looked at me and said, "Robert, you look tired." I shrugged. "I'm fine." He didn't insist. But at the end of lunch, he said something that stuck with me. "You know what I've realized? With my children, they only learn to value you when you stop always being available, not out of malice, but because we taught them to expect that, and now they think that's how it works." I didn't answer, but I knew he was right. That night Rachel called me. She was crying. She'd had a terrible fight with her husband. She needed to talk. I listened. I gave her some advice. I stayed on the phone for an hour. When she hung up, she said, "Thank you, Dad. You always know what to say." But I kept thinking. She always called me when she needed something, money, advice, comfort. But when was the last time she called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time she asked me about my day? I couldn't remember. I realized early on that the support I had given for decades had turned into a silent expectation. They no longer thanked me, not because they were bad, but because they had gotten used to it. And when you get used to something, you stop noticing it. I stopped explaining myself. It was no use saying I feel invisible. It was no use saying I need attention too. Because to them I didn't need it. I was the father. The father was always okay. The father always solved things. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I was too busy to notice, or too old to care. But I understood everything, and that's precisely why I decided to stop. Never stop loving. Stop being available without limits. Stop being the automatic problem solver. Stop giving without ever receiving any real recognition. I was going to continue being a father, but I was going to be a father on my terms. And they were going to have to learn to see me again, as a person, not as a resource. I started slowly, small changes. When David called asking me to pick up his grandchildren from school, I said I had an appointment. It wasn't a lie. I had arranged to play chess with Richard, but I knew I would have cancelled before. This time, I didn't. David was surprised. "Oh, okay, Dad. I'll figure it out." And it worked. He asked the neighbor to pick up the children. I realized that the world didn't fall apart because I said no. David solved the problem on his own, and maybe, just maybe, he realized that I also had a life of my own. Rachel messaged me asking if I could review the clinic's contracts. She was expanding to a second location. I read the message, and I didn't reply right away. I waited 2 days. When I replied, I said I was busy that week, but that we could reschedule for the following week. She said that was fine. I wasn't being cruel, I was being honest. I had other things to do. My life didn't revolve solely around their needs. Thomas called me again asking for money. This time it was for car repairs, $800. I took a deep breath and I said no. It was the first time. There was silence on the other end of the line. and then he said somewhat awkwardly, "Okay, Dad, I'll figure it out." I hung up the phone and stared at him. My hand was trembling. Slightly, not from fear, from relief. I had said no. And the sky didn't fall. In the following weeks, the calls decreased. Not by much, but enough for me to notice. And when they did call, there was a new hesitation, as if they had realized I wasn't on autopilot anymore. I continued living my life. I started taking painting classes, something Margaret always wanted me to do. I started walking in the park every morning. I met new people. I made new friends. And for the first time in years, I felt light. David's birthday was in October. Every year I organized a dinner. I booked a restaurant, I paid the bill, I bought a generous gift. It was a tradition. This year I didn't do anything, not out of revenge, simply because I was tired of being the only one making an effort. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't take the initiative. The day passed. Nobody mentioned anything. 2 days later, David called me. He was upset. He didn't say it directly, but I could tell from his tone of voice. "Dad, did you forget my birthday?" I could have lied. I could have said I was busy. But I decided to be honest. "I haven't forgotten, David. I just thought that this year you'd like to celebrate in your own way, without me organizing everything." There was a pause. And then he said somewhat defensively, "I don't need you to organize it, Dad. I just thought it was strange that you didn't even call." "I was expecting you to call," I said calmly, "to tell me how it went, to include me. Not as an organizer, as a father." He remained silent. Then he murmured, "Okay, Dad," and hung up. I knew I had planted something in his head. Maybe he didn't understand it now. But eventually he would. Rachel invited me to dinner at her house. I was surprised. It had been months since she'd done that. I accepted. When I arrived, I noticed there were other people there, her friends, couples. It was a kind of small party, and in the middle of dinner, one of her friends mentioned the clinic, and Rachel told the whole story of how it had started. She spoke about the difficulties, about the sleepless nights, about the fear of failure. But he didn't mention my name. He didn't mention the money I gave. He didn't mention the advice. Nothing. It was as if she had done everything herself. I didn't say anything during dinner, but when I left, I knew I wouldn't be able to help her so easily again, because she had rewritten the story. And in that new version, I didn't exist. Thomas knocked on my door one Friday night. He was desperate. He'd lost his job. He needed help paying the rent, $3,000. I invited him in. I made coffee. We sat in the living room. He was visibly nervous. "Dad, I know I haven't been the best son. I know I ask for too much, but I'm desperate. I need this money, otherwise I'll be evicted." I looked at him, and I felt pity, real pity, but not the kind of pity that would make me give in. "Thomas, how many times have I helped you in the last 5 years?" He blinked. I don't know. Several. 17 times, I said calmly. "I have it all written down. 17 times. Do you know how much that adds up to?" He shook his head. $42,000. He turned pale. "And do you know how many times you paid me back?" He didn't answer. "None. He didn't even really thank me. You always said, 'Thank you, Dad,' but it was automatic, like thanking a waiter." He lowered his head. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I swear that—" I raised my hand. "I'm not charging you. I don't want the money back. But I'm also not going to continue being your plan B. You need to learn to fend for yourself." He remained silent for a long time. And then he said, his voice breaking, "So you're not going to help me?" "Not this time." He left without saying anything else, and I sat there in the empty room, knowing I had done the right thing, even if it hurt. The following months were strange. The calls almost stopped. David would send me short messages now and then. "Everything okay, Dad?" I'd reply, "Everything's fine." And the conversation would die there. Rachel stopped asking me for advice. Maybe she realized I wasn't as available anymore. Or maybe she found other people to ask for help. Thomas completely disappeared. I heard from David that he had gotten a new job, that he had moved to a smaller apartment, that he was making ends meet. I felt a pang of guilt, but I also felt pride. He had done it. All by himself. Christmas arrived. I waited to see if anyone would invite me. No one invited me. On Christmas Eve, Rachel called me. "Dad, we're getting together here at home tomorrow. You're coming, right?" It was a rhetorical question. She expected me to say yes. I thought for a moment, and then I said, "I won't be able to go, Rachel." There was a shocked silence. "What do you mean?" "It's Christmas, Dad." "I know, but I've already made other plans." "What plans?" "My plans." It wasn't a lie. Richard had invited me to spend Christmas with his, family. I had accepted. Rachel was speechless, and then in a cold voice she said, "Okay, Merry Christmas," and he hung up. I spent Christmas at Richard's house. It was welcoming, different, and for the first time in years, I felt valued, not as a resource, as a person. January arrived cold and silent. I didn't receive a single call from my children during the first 2 weeks of the year. I didn't call either. I was testing something. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize I existed, that I wasn't just a tool, that I was a person with feelings. On January 20th, David called me. He was confused. "Dad, are you okay?" "I am," I replied. "Are you upset with us?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not upset, David. I'm tired." "Tired of what?" "To be invisible, to only exist when you need something." He remained silent, and then he said defensively, "Dad, that's not true. We love you." "I know you love me," I said calmly, "but you don't see me. You don't ask how I am. You're not interested in my life. You only show up when you need help." He tried to argue, but I knew deep down he knew I was right. We hung up without resolving anything, but I knew I had planted a seed. Rachel texted me a few days later. She said she wanted to talk. We arranged to meet for coffee. When we met, she was nervous. "Dad, I'm so sorry if we made you feel this way." "It's not about apologizing, Rachel. It's about changing." She nodded, but I knew words were easy. Actions were what counted. In March, something happened. David called me. He was panicking. He had made a serious mistake on his tax return. He had forgotten to declare a significant amount of investments. Now the IRS was issuing an audit notice against him. "Dad, I need your help. You understand these things. I don't know what to do." I listened to everything, and then I said, "David, I'm not going to solve this for you." "What?" "Dad, I could be fined $30,000. "I know, and it's terrible. But you need to solve this yourself, or hire an accountant. I'm no longer your automatic problem solver." He was speechless, and then he shouted, "I can't believe it! You're my father!" "Exactly," I said calmly. "I am your father, not your employee." And I hung up. In the following days, he tried to call me several times. I didn't answer. He left messages, some angry, some pleading. I didn't give in. A week later, he sent me a message. He said he had hired an accountant, that he was sorting it out, and that he was angry with me, but that he understood. I replied, "I'm proud of you." And it was true. In April, Rachel faced a problem at the clinic. One of the veterinarians who worked there had committed medical malpractice. The pet owner was suing the clinic. Rachel was desperate. She called me crying. "Dad, I don't know what to do. This could ruin everything I've built." I felt like hugging her, like fixing everything, but I knew that wasn't what she needed. "Rachel, you built this. You have the ability to handle this. Hire a good lawyer. Talk to your insurance company. You'll get through this." "But I need you, Dad." "You don't need me to solve things for you. You need me to believe in you." "And I do." She remained silent, and then she said, in a weak voice, "Thank you." 2 months later, she called me. She had resolved the legal process. She had left through a settlement. The clinic was doing well. and for the first time she said something that moved me. "Dad, thank you for not solving it for me. I needed to learn that I can do it myself." I smiled and said, "I always knew you could do it." Thomas reappeared in June. He knocked on my door one Saturday afternoon. He was thinner, more serious. "Dad, can I come in?" I opened the door. We made coffee. We sat on the porch. He was silent for a while, and then he said, "I'm here to apologize." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "I used you for years, and I didn't even realize it. Or maybe I did realize it and just didn't care. I always thought you were fine, that you didn't need anything, that you were, I don't know, too strong to need attention." He cleared his throat. "When you said no to me that night, I was angry, very angry. But then I realized you were right. I had never managed on my own. Because I always had you, and I thought that would last forever." I put my hand on his shoulder. "I'm not going to last forever, Thomas. Nobody does. And you need to know that you can live without me taking care of everything." He nodded, and then he said something that broke me. "I miss us talking, really talking. Not about money, just talking." I smiled. "Me too." And we talked for hours about life, about Margaret, about mistakes, about new beginnings. It was the best conversation we've had in years. On my 68th birthday, something different happened. David, Rachel, and Thomas showed up at my house, together. They had organized a luncheon. They had brought food, presents, and more. Importantly, they had attracted attention. During lunch, Rachel asked me about painting classes. David asked me about my friends. Thomas asked me if I was happy. Nobody asked for anything. Nobody needed help. They just wanted to be with me. And in the end, David stood up and said, "Dad, we know we messed up. We took you for granted. And you're not. You are everything. And we're trying to do better." I looked at the three of them, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Recognition. True love. I didn't say everything's okay, because it wasn't. I still had hurt feelings. I still had things to heal. But I said, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me." And that was enough. Today, when I look back, I see everything clearly. I learned something that took decades to understand. Silence is not weakness. Waiting is not passivity. And ceasing to explain yourself is not giving up. It is preserving your dignity. I realized early on that my support had become an obligation, that my presence had become invisible, and I could have continued accepting it. I could have continued giving without receiving recognition. Many people do that. Many people die doing that. But I chose differently. I chose to walk away, not out of anger, with clarity. And what I discovered was this: those who truly love you will seek you out when you stop always being available. Those who only used you will disappear, and those who are worthwhile will learn. My children learned, not because I yelled, not because I humiliated them, but because I stopped making it easy for them. And when you stop making it easy for them, people have two choices. They either grow up or they disappear. My children have grown up. Today, our conversations are different, more honest, more balanced. They see me, truly, not as a resource, as a human being, as a father who also has limits, feelings, needs. And I learned to say no without guilt. I learned that not every warning is a favor, that those who understand early on don't need to chase after things, and that dignity sometimes is simply about stopping the need to justify yourself. You, who are listening to me now, might recognize something from this story. Maybe you too have given too much, supported too much, and felt that no one else notices. I want you to know you're not wrong for wanting to be seen. You're not being selfish for wanting reciprocity. And you don't need to explain yourself to people who should naturally value you. Silence, when used well, teaches more than 1,000 words, and sometimes the greatest proof of love you can give someone is letting them learn to live without you solving all their problems. Because only then will they understand who you've always been, and what you've always done. If this story resonated with you, if at any point you saw yourself in it, I ask one thing. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to keep bringing you stories like this. Stories that maybe you're living now, or that you've already lived, or that you will live, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it, because sometimes we need to know that we're not alone, that what we feel is real, and that we have the right to want more. Thank you for listening. Until next time.